Ubaid Rahman, and I'm currently working as the head of energy unit at STPI. And initially, I would like to actually thank DSG for their efforts in making this happen. So, well, we'll definitely go into the details of the discussion, technical discussion a bit later. In this session, we aim to sort of increase the knowledge of on solar radiation modification, also known as SRM. But particularly today in the context of Pakistani scientific, civil society, and policymaking communities by sort of initially providing some expert perspectives on the global research and governance aspects of these novel climate intervention technologies. And we'll be doing a series of webinars on this, and really glad to see a lot of participants joining us through our live streams on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. So yeah, we'll hopefully try to sort of also, I would request you to make it this engagement or webinar more interactive. But before we go into the technical discussion, let me just really quickly set some of the housekeeping rules. So along with the Zoom, the event is being live streamed on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And the speakers are encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they're speaking, as long as their network allows them to do so. And the webinar is being recorded, and the video recording will be posted online. And you're all welcome to revisit the discussion later, and feel free to share it within your networks as well. We also invite questions from our audience and the colleagues as the session goes, or will also allow you dedicated time to ask any questions at the end. For those who have joined us through Zoom, can put those questions in the Q&A or the chat box, while the rest of the people who have joined us through different streams can put those down in the comments or any other medium, and we'll sort of pick it up from there. And also, I would be requesting all to have the chat box open in a window, so you can indicate that you want to speak by also clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window as well. So again, just before coming to the discussion today, we have been joined by some distinguished experts of the field, some environmental scientists, and the people who have been working on this field very closely. So just starting, thank you so much, Dr. Fahim Khokar from Institute of Environmental Sciences and Engineering, the National University of Science and Technology. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. We do have Professor Dr. Athar Hussain, the Professor of Metallurgical from Commonwealth University, Islamabad, Ms. Varisha Khan, who's also from Enigma Software Solution, and then thanks to Mr. Hassan Sipra, the Director of Global Engagement at the Alliance for Just Deliberation. Last but not the least, we have already been joined by Ms. Zainab Ling, who's currently heading the Ecological Sustainability and the Circular Economy in the STPI, and will very shortly also be joined by Dr. Khalid Waleed, who's currently working as a research fellow at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. So once again, on behalf of SDPI and Just Innovation Solar Engineering, I welcome you all and thank you for joining the discussion today. So now, before coming to Dr. Fahim for his interventions, let me just sort of set a quick tone of the discussion that we have at hand. I mean, we're all very well aware of the climate crisis that we are particularly developing and underdeveloped countries such as Pakistan is going through. So, I mean, the climate is far more worse than just environmental issue. It is more of a very powerful threat to the people's livelihood, their health, security, as well as survival. I mean, if we just even look at the increase in global GHG emissions, so that has actually led to an urgent need to address this climate crisis. And until and unless we take some very necessary measures to limit this challenge or limit unless we don't take any reform measures to limit this environmental degradation, such as the Paris Alignment, its goals and the limiting of the global temperatures to 1.5 degree, as per that, would not be possible. So now, when we actually take the whole discussion around the climate to the context of Pakistan, we all fully understand that Pakistan currently hardly contributes around 0.88% of the global GHG emission, but still, it is one of the countries that is definitely most susceptible to the climate crisis. I mean, if we just look at the course of the past 2 decades, we have observed some extreme weather events, incurred substantial socioeconomic losses, and definitely we have also observed very well gradual increase in temperature of, I guess, as to the stats that I have from my department, it has increased 0.6 degree over the past century, with projections indicating a potential surge of up to 4.38 degrees centigrade by the year 2018. That is again as per the reports of IPCC. So again, despite Pakistan being a low polluting country, it is embarking on a trajectory that is marked by substantial growth in carbon emission. But now, I mean, we've definitely been talking a lot about the mitigation measures or adaptation measures, but today is to the idea of the discussion today is to sort of start looking at how to manage the risk from the temperature overshoot. And the fundamental objective is to shift the discussion from science to sort of policy when we're talking about, and this is where the concept of SRM or solar radiation modification come in, because SRM could be made possible through various ways, including surface albedo modification. There could be marine cloud writing and stratospheric aerosol injection. And there's a lot of things. Definitely, I'll be leaving it up for the experts today for joining us. But so the concept of solar radiation modification, also known as solar radiation management, or solar geoengineering. So this actually aims to address a symptom of climate change by reflecting sort of more sunlight back into the space, or by sort of allowing more infrared radiation from Earth to escape in order to reduce the Earth's temperature. And it includes sort of numerous proposed methods which differ significantly as well. So the point is that this technique could actually be a substitute for reducing emissions or removing the atmospheric CO2. Definitely, when we talk about Pakistan, the concept has not yet been established, and this was again going to be one of the starting points where we actually sort of start. So, although we know what is needed to solve the climate crisis, many politicians, businesses, I mean, when we talk generally about this space or this context, so these necessary decisions currently are not being undertaken, if I'm not wrong. So we need a transformation, one that sort of decouples the you know, the carbon GHGs from economic growth. It means massive negations that we actually talked about. So just with this, I'll be sort of coming to the discussion and the speakers we have on hand. So just starting with, thank you so much, Dr. Fahim, for joining us in this discussion. So, I mean, if I could actually, we can sort of set a tone to describe what our SRM is as a concept, and what is its landscape in Pakistan, or sort of what is its significance from the concept of Pakistan, because we clearly have not sort of thinking a lot around this aspect, or we're not sort of developing this initiative much more. But then again, there's a cost of being a technology lagger. And if this is one of the potential areas to which we can sort of address this challenge, perhaps definitely not in the shorter, but perhaps in a medium to a longer run. So with this, thank you so much for joining us. So over to you, Dr. Payne. Yeah.
Thank you, Obad, first of all, taking me on board and also having this rationale for this very important topic. And it's a very hot topic nowadays in the climate change science. And by the way, I would like to mention tell you that this kind of approaches have been taken into consideration in recent past as well. But because of their implications and offshoots that were actually not considered for any practical solution for this. But with the recent crisis of climate change, as it is getting deepens, the policymakers and scientists are actually compelled to consider a range of emerging approaches, such as solar radiation modification or management. Even some people used to call it solar radiation management. And even when you use this term management, then it has to have a certain question: who is going to manage this? So a lot of other implications and policy question that need to be addressed before going into this pragmatic solution. I would say it's not an optimal, but I would say it could be a pragmatic solution. So, okay, so there are actually two approaches. The first one is to remove directly carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, which we call it mitigation, actually. Okay, and the second approach is through geoengineering or such kind of approaches like SRM or so. So the ultimate goal is to cool the atmosphere and lower the global warming potential, good global warming, and also reach the threshold set by the scientist community, 1.5 degrees Celsius, to curtail the global warming. by the end of 21st century. So, but the thing is, actually, we need to be very careful while deciding, and particularly when you were asking me about the context of Pakistan, as Pakistan is not a big emitter, we know but we are very much vulnerable to these negative impacts of climate change. But I guess the main emphasis still, although it's not a big emitter, but the main emphasis should be in the Pakistani context should be on the removal of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases as a first stage. In the second stage should be an adaptation measure to lower the vulnerability towards these things. While in context of SRM, Pakistan could do such kind of experiment that could benefit him. This is only in the glaciated region if you do like this. But overall, because this experiment has certain implications and unexplored avenues which need to be extensive research. And by the way, the world is heading towards exploring the ideas. I would like to quote here, there is a recent experiment that was financed by Bill Gates and in collaboration with Harvard University in US. They have recently, I mean, a couple of years back, they were planned to spray some chalk dust into the stratosphere, and they use it as an experimental basis in Sweden, in Kiruna. They have selected. So I'm not updated much about their outcomes, or even no outcome have been published so far. So, but this have been there since a while now, and the peoples are thinking, our scientists and even the policymakers are thinking of having this climate alteration to reduce the radiation, to manage the radiation. So there are a couple of options available I would like to mention here, like so how we can actually go for that particularly. So for instance, there's one thing which is like injecting aerosol particles, or even way back, there was a Nobel laureate, Paul Crutzen, actually, who introduced this idea back in early 2000s, first decade of this 21st century, that by injecting sulfur dioxide into the lower stratosphere will actually help, but that was later ruled out because it has a strong implication for the ozone layer. So that was rejected later on. So, and then there is the other option now, by brightening the clouds, by brightening the glaciers, that can actually reflect back more radiation into the space. And then even at the micro urban level, the roads and all the other absorbing material or infrastructure, then convert them into the like reflecting surfaces that will reflect more shortwave coming back into the space and have less infrared radiation. So that will be trapped by the greenhouse gas. So these are a couple of options available, but I'm still skeptic and to advocate about SRM. But so the first priority should be at any level, rather micro or macro level, should be given to the direct removal of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And if there is inevitable circumstances, then probably we can think for that such kind of solutions, unless we have fully explored their offshoots or their implications. For instance, I give you an example. Being an atmospheric scientist, I would say when we will reflect by injecting certain aerosols or reflectors in the stratosphere, so there will be less radiation available in that troposphere. So the tropospheric chemistry is mainly driven by OH, which is a hydroxyl radical, and which is the main production of OH is photolysis of water vapor, and that is done through the shortwave radiation. So if this amount of radiation will be less, then there will be less OH production in that troposphere. That means it has a huge implication of towards not only towards the air pollution and the atmospheric chemistry, but also towards the greenhouse gas removal, because OH is a primary removal, it's a very strong oxidizing agent. So CH4 rapidly react with OH and then turns into like other byproducts and ultimately into CO. So there will be huge implication, and still a lot of other things need to be explored, not just the atmospheric composition, rather the dynamics will be changed. There will be less light, means there will be less energy in the system, and how the nature will react to these substantial and subtle changes, nobody knows yet. So we have to be very careful. So primarily, so in a nutshell, I would say that the first focus should be on direct capture, removal of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And such kind of geoengineering solutions could be taken as a last resort to achieve the set goals for climate change mitigation or adaptations. Thank you.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Fahim. Wonderful interventions. And I'm thinking we right that we all, I think, sitting here agree that there are a lot of question marks that need to be addressed before definitely any country or especially countries such as Pakistan sort of ventures into such initiatives. So again, this is also one of the reasons that we sort of try to scope this discussion as well. I think you're very right that definitely the removal of carbon dioxide needs to be at this point needs to be sort of the priority for the country as well. So just I think just leading this from here to and coming to Dr. Akhtar Hussain. So Dr. Akhtar, you have been again researching a lot around the different technologies specifically. So if you can sort of highlight some of the techniques and technologies that can actually be addressed this, and I mean, may the sort of like stratospheric aerosol injection, SAI, and meaning cloud bursting as a primary, some of the techniques that can actually be used. So, with this coming to you, and if you also want to sort of reflect upon any of the interventions that have just been highlighted by Dr. Fahim as well. So, yeah, mainly request from you is to sort of highlight what technologies were used or what techniques you currently exist that can actually be taken that can be scoped. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ubaid. Dr. Fahim has rightly pointed out that carbon dioxide removal is the actual solution for the mitigation of the climate change. But there are certain difficulties or hurdles that the progress is not that much as we were expecting. For example, planting trees is the one of the best solution. This is the geoengineering example. However, the difficulties are there, political will is needed, other factors that are slowing down the speed at which this should have been occurred. So one is definitely start thinking about the alternatives that can be made available. Dr. Fahim correctly mentioned few alternatives are being discussed. For example, just like through the injection of the sulfur aerosols in the stratosphere of the atmosphere. The stratosphere is typically 25 kilometer vertically upward, like this thing from where we are sitting right now. So now what are the implications and how this can be achieved? This all comes in the regime of the SRM technology. So this is one, possibly can be achieved through the construction of stratospheric aeroplanes, etc., or some other means. A lot has been done, lot has been discussed. So next technique that one can use is the brightening of the clouds, marine cloud brightening. So for that one, spraying technology needs to be improved. Pakistan has a lot of long coast along the Arabian Sea. So potential for Pakistan also exists to explore this possibility. And also importantly, we as a nation have to think about what are its implication, no matter what type of solar geoengineering application is considered for Pakistan. So we have very little so far achieved, or we have not yet developed enough information that can be used to be deliberated. So this aspect also has to be understood or has to be expanded. Now, one thing my colleagues worry a lot, that Pakistan being a developing country, what it is going to do in the context of the technology of solar geoengineering. So for that one, I can quote one example. For example, this CERN, CERN, this stands for Centro Nuclear European Research-Atura, which means the European Laboratory for Nuclear Research. This is one of the very sophisticated international laboratory. So Pakistan is an associate member of that one. This is a highly advanced technology. They look for the mysteries of the creation of the universe through the LHC, Large Hadron Collider at the CERN, at the Geneva and the France border. So point is that Pakistan is contributing in that one also technologically. They have a different type of experiment, 4 experiments. So Pakistan has been contributing to the CMS experiment. So there is always a possibility and opening and channel available if country will exist to interact. And this has been happening since early 1990s. And now I read their history, more recent history. It looks like now they are contributing more since early 2015, etc. So the point is that if this technology comes in, like this sulfate aerosol injection and these things, so definitely Pakistan will also be able to contribute. Now, what studies so far I have done with my team, etc., the conclusion is that a lot of curiosity, lot of worry, and lot of expectations are attached as far as the perception study of solar geoengineering is considered in the realm of the academics of Pakistan. So the point is that all the colleagues or the participants with whom we interacted are interested to know what it is, how it works, and in particularly how it is going to affect Pakistan, what Pakistan is going to get from this technology. Like you see, climate change is a global problem. Okay, it is not controlled by one country, one region, for example. Now there is a lot of heat, excess heat in the Iran part of the Iranian part. So there is always some extreme happenings. So these high temperatures, at least they can be addressed through the use of the solar geoengineering technologies to some extent. And Pakistan can have and will have a role to play here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Akhar. Dr. Akhar, if you could also sort of very briefly touch upon some of the techniques that we would have to sort of study the SRM, especially talking about climate modeling. We also heard so much about geoengineering model in comparison project, intercomparison project as well. So perhaps some very quick interventions around those, if possible.
Okay, thank you. I can very briefly mention what is going on. So just like Dr. Fahim mentioned that it all happens in related to the chemistry of the atmosphere. So the climate models have a component which is called the climate component of the models in the atmosphere. So those models, those who have this climate chemistry component, they are able to simulate the response of the injection of sulfur particles. Now, the general perception, as Dr. Fahim mentioned, is to large extent it is still prevailing that if you inject sulfur particles into the atmosphere in a specific way, some changes in the ozone layer occur. Okay. But this is not the case always. In some cases, if we change the strategy of injecting the sulfur particles, the damage to the ozone layer is slightly less, or it tends to be negligible. So a lot of variety in the models are existing. Now, the dilemma with Pakistan, as in the case of climate change, is that simply even in now 75 years after the independence, we do not have a climate model tuned to our requirements. This is an extremely surprising element. We have invested heavily, we know, in different aspects, in the physics, in the biosciences, in computer sciences, in engineering, etc., etc. But we do not have any such model. This is one main problem. Generally, it makes a little sense technically to say that a climate model has to be tuned with the specific requirements of one region. But this is how the global climate model works, because all of their parameterization, that the models that we are using for projection, long-term projections, short-term projections of Pakistan, are all tuned to give the best weather for Europe, for best weather for the Americas, okay? And their conditions, the altitudes, the latitudes are very different. Okay, weather conditions are to somewhat quite common, similar, but geography is different. So we have not yet have done any intellectual thought over that one. We have not developed our research groups in various universities. I have been attempting this in my research group. So we have a lot of lack of this aspect of climate modeling. And then comes the modeling of the chemical reactions that we are deliberately doing in the atmosphere of Earth. So this is a next level of complications, which is much more even complex to handle. And we have absolutely no development of that one in any of our academic institutes, universities, or any government organization. So that is terribly missing. Unless we start controlling this one, we start developing our own parameterizations that are relevant. Okay. Then we will be able to have the more accurate predictions. We will better understand what is missing and how we can better predict weather, how we can better mitigate the adverse consequences of climate change.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Such insightful interventions and very well noted points. Fully agree and in line with the point that you raised around that the modeling aspect, especially when we talk about countries such as Pakistan, that is ostensibly missing and needs to be sort of came up. Perhaps we can also go for some of the scenarios that sort of encounters or features for these initiatives. But I think the first thing, that the first step in the right direction would be to come up with some strong models, especially for these climate models and the points that you talked about. So with this, I think let me come to Hassan Sipra Sahab. Hassan Sipra Sahab, thank you so much again once for making this all sort of collectively happen in collaboration with SDPI. So firstly, I think your very brief initial interventions on the discussion that has actually happened till yet, the points that Dr. Fahim raised, the point that Dr. Athar sort of also raised. Is there any specific aspect that we're sort of missing currently, or is there anything that we're sort of going into the perhaps the opposite direction of it? And secondly, just taking lead from what that Dr. Athar just mentioned in the last about the climate modeling, I think if you look a bit beyond the modeling side, what are some of the other experiments that are being done? And if you can also sort of shed some light on the this global north and south research divide and what does that actually mean? So yeah, with this, over to you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much, Abed. First and foremost, for organizing this. You guys have been wonderful partners in that regard. So thank you to you, Dr. Khaled, Dr. Zainab, Saira, especially for doing the legwork and putting this all together. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to actually hear both from Dr. Fahim and Dr. Athar about setting the background for SRM. A couple of things that I noticed didn't come through when Dr. Fahim said that mitigation and adaptation should be the priority both for the globe and for Pakistan as well. 100% in agreement with that. He also said that we cannot get to the Paris Agreement 1.5 to 2 degree target without direct air carbon dioxide removal or carbon capture. 100% in agreement with them on that. But the problem with all of those, with mitigation, adaptation, and CDR or carbon dioxide removal, is that they are very expensive. They will require a long time to scale up. And that scalability is dependent on a lot of factors that are currently unraveling in terms of our governance framework. So for mitigation, it's hundreds of billions of dollars a year. For adaptation, it's the same. For carbon capture, we have only invested $4 billion total into it, but the expected current price for carbon dioxide removal is $600 to $1,000 per ton. That figure needs to come down drastically before it is considered affordable for countries and companies and peoples to actually purchase carbon dioxide removal credits. And by that, I really mean the technology part, not the afforestation, not the tree planting stuff. I mean having actual machinery that literally sucks carbon out of the atmosphere. So scale and cost are two very large things. With respect to that, solar geoengineering technologies, particularly marine cloud brightening and particularly stratospheric aerosol injection, are extremely cheap and they are extremely fast acting. They have a lot of other problems, but these are the two major benefits for them, is that if you are to do stratospheric aerosol injection, you would pretty immediately, within a year's time, you would see the temperature, the global temperature come down. How we know this is because we have observed large-scale volcanic eruptions. The most recent example was Mount Pinatubo in 1991 in the Philippines, which erupted and spewed sulfur dioxide all the way up into the stratosphere. And what we observed is that for the next year, the global average temperature came down by 0.5 degree. It also had other impacts like on precipitation and other climate variables. Those are less well understood. But we know that by injecting reflective material into the atmosphere, you can actually bring the global temperature down. The impacts on precipitation, on agriculture, on biodiversity, on economic security, water security, and many, many other aspects are ill understood, not just for Pakistan, but for the entire world as a whole. We have not done a lot of work on it. So this is where I think that Dr. Athar's point was really crucial when he talked about CERN, and he said that Pakistan is part of this consortium now that has been developed to study the origins of the universe. Similarly, in the solar geoengineering space, we have projects like that are coming to fruition. One of the big ones is the Geoengineering Model Intercomparison Project, which basically looks at various potential experiments to see what would happen if you did stratospheric aerosol injection or marine cloud brightening. That's at the computational level. There's also a need to understand what's happening at the lab scale and potentially what's going to happen at the field experiment phase if we ever get to that stage. At the lab scale, there are other experiments that can be done so that you don't have to rely on sulfur dioxide, for example. We know sulfur dioxide because we see it in volcanoes, but there may exist other elements, other materials that equally have the same reflective properties as sulfur dioxide, but don't have the harmful impacts on the ozone, for example. So those are types of things that are being studied quite heavily and quite extensively now in the global north countries. So recently there was a big call for proposals from an organization called the Simons Foundation, which is a US-based philanthropy, which has given out multiple grants to study the various computational and physical science aspects of solar geoengineering. And those include alternative reflective materials that might be as or more effective with less harmful impacts. Similarly, for marine cloud brightening, there have been experiments that have been designed and that are being tested. One that has been tested was out in Australia under their protection of the Great Barrier Reef Initiative. Another that has been at this point scuttled was based out of Alameda County in San Francisco Bay Area in California of the US, run by the University of Washington, which at present, because of public backlash or a few other reasons, the city council has voted to not continue forward with that experiment. Similarly, Dr. Fahim also mentioned the Harvard experiment ScopeX. ScopeX was very simple design. All they really wanted to do was basically take some material, reflective material, I think carbon calcite or calcium carbonate, something like that, and just dump it out of an airplane or a weather balloon or something in the upper atmosphere and see what happens at the base level or at the very small scale level. Unfortunately, the Swedish indigenous groups, particularly the Sami Council over there, played an instrumental role in making sure that that experiment does not move forward because they felt not enough public engagement had been done on these fronts. So in terms of research, this is critically important that scientists begin to understand not just what the potential needs are, both for computational sort of experiments, but also lab experiments as well as field experiments. What the level of public engagement should be for that, and where they need to bring on board both the public and the policymakers first, and to build legitimacy and trust in the process. Because most people, when you talk to them about solar geoengineering, they really think things like that movie, The Matrix, where they're like, oh, you're just going to block out the sun and then that will be catastrophe. The reason most scientists are even considering this situation is because they can see that we are unlikely to meet the 1.5 to 2 degree target. And when we are unlikely to do that, it will result in massive suffering and loss of life and devastation and destruction. And in that scenario, they would like to at least be sure that these technologies that we are considering to develop, that A, are they worth it? B, who is going to be in charge of them? And C, how are they going to be implemented at a global scale? Because these experiments and these technologies are all global in nature. So if you do stratospheric aerosol injection, it will have a global impact. If you do MCB, it will have regional impacts, but those regional impacts will basically bounce around to create a global impact. So without global consensus, without global engagement, it's unlikely that you are going to be able to do this type of work or to get this type of technology ready in case we need it. So I think I've said enough for now, but I'll hand it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prasad. Thank you firstly for doing that bit of a course correction of the session as well, and very well noted points around both that you highlighted about the technologies, the experimentations that have been conducted, how this global divide, and also thank you for sort of also experiencing, mentioning how far we have been developing these technologies and sort of also needs to sort of meet the charge, and now connecting your point from again the research. Let me just come to Ms. Varisha. So Ms. Varisha, you have been we all know that you have been leading some of the research work around the climate change and SRM. So what does your research, especially when we talk about the context of either South Asia or the region particularly, or even perhaps the case for Pakistan, but more, let's as of now stick to South Asia. What does the research tell about the climate change and how it is sort of and its interlinkages with the SRM? And do you think is regional cooperation necessary in this subfield of climate change? So yeah, Ms. Varisha, if you can, yeah, go ahead. Thank you. Sorry, we cannot actually hear you as of now. You're not audible. So perhaps I think we can perhaps wait a bit for Ms. Varisha, but before that, let me just again come to perhaps Zenith first. So yeah, thank you. So okay, Varisha is there. Varisha, we cannot hear you actually. Yeah, if you can sort of speak, we could see your video, but we cannot hear you. No, you're not audible. If you can perhaps try removing the microphone, headphones you're wearing. Yeah, we can perhaps hear you. No, you're not audible. You're not audible. So I think just in the meanwhile, let me just again come to Zainab. Zainab, you have been hearing from that, but you also have been working a lot around the climate change policies in Pakistan, recession adaptation plan, climate mitigation policies that we do have in place. We fully understand. I think taking lead from a discussion, definitely the concept is significant, is important, but perhaps given the whole the focus or the priority focus of different areas, it's going to perhaps we need to see devise a way in which it can actually be brought upfront in the policy areas of Pakistan. And also perhaps one very key area which I'm seeing from the discussion is that we need to build a narrative around the use of around the whole SRM concept and how this can actually be taken forward as well. So perhaps if you can also sort of initially had see how this actually sort of takes place or uh, in the Pakistan's climate policy front, and then I'll also be requesting you to sort of shed some light. Perhaps if you want to go on this question first, that how do you see the role of a good diplomacy or good what we should call social media, perhaps engagement, or how do we actually see the role of youth and women in science and SRM as well? So yeah, so with this, over to you.
Thank you so much, Abed, and it's been a pleasure listening to all other experts. So I think this is quite a technical debate and making it sound so easy, all the experts here. So thank you for that. So I'll start with how I got to know about SRM. Well, during one of my courses, when I was doing my bachelor's in environmental sciences, one of the courses was atmospheric chemistry. And within that course, we learned about what is SRM and the geoengineering techniques, why they are used. And at that time, my bachelor's was, it was, I believe, seventh semester. It was, I think, 2017 when I studied about SRM, and it was at very initial stages. The debate was not anything around, in South Asia level. It was a very technical debate at that time. So not much was, discovered at that point of time, apart from learning it in the perspective of giving exam. But I think even at that time, this was considered as one of the key strategies to mitigate climate change. That was the one pertinent point around which we learned about SRM, because climate mitigation was quite a focus for Pakistan at that time also. And even at that time, what we asked our instructor was, how can Pakistan get involved in this SRM and everything? So our instructors told us that, it's a far dream for Pakistan as of now. A lot of resources are required. So technical experimentation, it will take a lot of time. But maybe you never know if agencies like SUPACO, Pakistan Met Department, and other agencies, they think about it. Maybe you never know, it can happen in next few years. So I think if talking about the technicalities around SRM, well, you are talking about engaging people. I believe that for engaging people, you have to develop a narrative first. And for developing a narrative first, you need to know what technicalities are actually involved. Not everyone within South Asia region understands the technical concepts, because in our local languages, they are not available. We do not know how this is going to happen. Even if somebody like Hassan or somebody like Dr. Fahim and Dr. Atta Hussain explains, it's going to take a lot of time for us to understand and engage people at this mass level. Making it part of policy debate would again require setting a narrative first. And for setting up narrative, a lot of advocacy is required around it. But for that advocacy also, we need to envision a goal, a broader vision for why SRM is needed. As I mentioned at that time when I was studying, so the broader vision was, this is a climate mitigation technique. Now, how do you explain SRM to people who are vulnerable, who are being affected, and why this technique matters to them? That is how the narrative needs to be set. Once the narrative is set, you create advocacy around it. This is one step that Hassan and SDPI are doing collectively to create and set up the advocacy around SRM to create awareness. But for that, but because we are doing this in English, so many people will not be understanding what the debate is actually happening. So I think doing this in English, and then explaining it gradually to our people in other local languages would help. But I think before that, we need to engage the policymakers for this open discussion. And we need to see what level of conspiracies are already existing around the SRM. As Hassan also mentioned, whenever scientists are working around it, so there are debates, there are different theories attached to it, but culturally also there might be certain theories attached to it. Like you said, oh, you're going to block the sun for mitigating climate. So culturally in Pakistan, there might be so many theories around which, you can see that how blocking the sun or maybe using this technique can help us to mitigate climate. People might say that, oh, you're intervening with natural processes, it's going to create disasters. So there could be narratives, and I have heard these narratives around SRM and other geoengineering scientific terminology. So I think that is something we need to get a first before setting up anything for this SRM, and then engage the policymakers in an open debate. Listen to what their perspectives are, how much they understand this method, and what they would like to know about it, to integrate it in existing policies, or maybe to develop some new action plan or something around it. Like carbon markets was one of the subject that was introduced back in 2009 and 10, and now gradually we are working towards a policy. So I think similar sort of narrative needs to be set up around it to make it more acceptable amongst the policymakers and the locals, and then moving forward. Secondly, one of the key debates that in which I usually engage with, whatever the topic is, if it's related to climate, is that we need to make it understandable for a common farmer, because farmer is a person that is directly being affected due to climate change. For a farming person, this needs to be made more understandable. And then for technical persons, for the policymakers, and then how you engage the masses. So I think advocacy and campaigning is very important. Other than that, I believe ethical research. I think academia, we have the academia representatives, they're already conducting that. But what level of research is being made part of, how open that research is, how that research is being advocated with the public sector, with the private sector, and other development partners. That is what matters. On SRM, there's research happening, and there are really good research papers. I was just going through some of them that are being produced, but I mean, nobody knows about the research papers. So how that research is being translated into opinion pieces, into newspapers, and how webinars and seminars are being conducted based on those research papers that students and teachers are creating, I think that could be one possible strategy to develop more engagement. Then collaborations on SRM. There might be some academic collaborations, but I think there is still a lot is needed to develop and enhance collaboration. For example, not just academia, but academia and agencies like SUPARCO, like med departments, like disaster-related departments, how they collaborate to make it more, relevant and cohesive sort of collaboration, and then international collaborations. How with different organizations we can collaborate to make our research more productive. That again matters. Then developing building groups, or maybe collabs, sort of engaging youth, and maybe supporting ideathons, conducting ideathons around this SRM technique. How youth would like to work around SRM, how they would like to pitch, because we have a youth bulk, so there might be so many ideas around SRM. Once research is there, you can create this, you can engage. So there have to be more strategies on involving youth. Ideathons could be there, supporting climate tech startups, encouraging them, building their capacities. Eco entrepreneurship can be done. Upskilling academia and can be involved. The civil society organizations. I think that could be very much relevant. And last point would be, I think there needs to be there's a need for a leadership that needs to take ownership of this process if we need to make it more acceptable. And by leadership, I do not mean engaging some relevant ministry. By leadership, it could be anyone. Like you are here, Hassan, SDPI is here, other organizations, the ownership needs to be there. We are like, I am not saying SRM is, the final only solution for climate mitigation, or this is the right solution. No, I do not say that. I think a lot of research is still needed to for me to finally conclude that this is the right solution for climate mitigation. And for that, if ownership is there to conduct research, to discuss this as a way forward, only then I think this SRM technique can find its grounds in Pakistan. Even if experimentation is not done, at least research is being conducted, interest is being developed. I think that's where you get successful in introducing the concept in Pakistan. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
thank you, Zainab. Thank you for highlighting this aspect on the both ends. I think very rightly pointed out the narrative building, the discourse building has to be the first step going forward. So let me just check once again if Miss Varisha is with us. Miss Varisha, if you can sort of try, I believe you have been in the contact, if you can sort of try to speak something.
Okay, now can I be
Yeah,
heard?
thank you so much. Yes, you're perfectly audible. Yeah, so what again, coming back to the question that we posed, and again, Zainab has also sort of briefly highlighted the role of youth and the women in developing the science around SRM. But first, taking from you that you have been doing a lot of research around the SRM, what particularly when you talk about the South Asian region, what does your research indicate around those? If there are any sort of some of the key findings that you have that you would like to sort of share with the broader audience, and if it has any implications, and how do we actually look about what we say the regional cooperation is this important for this aspect, and how important it is for this aspect? Yeah, we just over to you, Mr. Isha.
Okay, so I'll take this. Okay. Actually, yes, we need a regional collaboration in order to particularly assessing the SRM responses for the South Asian regions, because if we are talking about South Asia particularly, so it needs all the information regarding and revolving around the South Asia particularly, because the temperatures and precipitations, the two major parameters that I am assessing currently, are the major factors that contribute, that are going to definitely behave in a twisted and very particular and different ways in different regions, if we talk about global north or global south. So these two major parameters are not going to behave evenly in like around the globe, if we talk about globally, global temperature or precipitations. So yes, we do need regional collaborations with the neighbor countries in South Asia, like Pakistan with Afghanistan, India, Iran, Nepal, Bhutan. These are the regions that I am targeting currently, like 7 countries in the South Asia. I cannot hear you with your mic.
Yeah, sorry, I was on the mute. So I just wanted to very quickly get back to see if you have any of the some very quick recommendations or perhaps implications coming out from your study, and how should perhaps Pakistan respond to this whole debate around the SRM? Just very briefly, if you can touch upon that.
Yes, the temperature. So the models that I am currently assessing tells that the temperature comes down, but the precipitation overall gets redistributed unevenly in the different regions of South Asia, and particularly Pakistan as well. It is the precipitation, the redistribution depends on the like if we talk about northern areas, the precipitation is going to behave differently than in tropical areas of Pakistan. So if the temperature comes down, the precipitation gets high. So it is just that the precipitation is going to behave very differently and we cannot we cannot tell the precipitation is going to you can say be maintained by the temperature that is going to be reduced because of the SRM scenarios.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Varisha. Well noted points. So I think just I believe taking lead also going forward, taking lead from a couple of questions that have been pushed in the Q&A box. Initially, we had the question around is there any global governance framework that can actually advocate for the establishment of these international governance structure to oversee SRM research and potential deployment. And then we actually had another question who sort of wanted to add how we can actually navigate this political and logistical complications of any such cooperation that sort of come up within the South Asian region, and what frameworks or agreements would be necessary to ensure that it succeeds, sort of. So I think if I can request any of our panelists to sort of shed light on that. I think perhaps Dr. Athar has responded to one of the questions, so I'll be initially coming to him if he wants to sort of shed some more light into any global governance framework, and then I'll be coming to Sipraf after you. So, yeah.
Okay, several non-state actors are very heavily or very actively engaged in this activity. For example, we have this collaboration we call C2G. They have many international diplomats were engaged in that one. They have been moving around the world. They were trying to convince the governments to get in touch with each other to start collaborating. They came here to Pakistan, also one of their senior representative. And also there are many organizations in the Nordic areas of the Europe, in the Central Europe, and also in the Northern America. They are very actively engaged in arranging the discussions around these aspects that require the interaction. But the main point is that global South, the way we understand the impacts of climate change, are more susceptible to the adverse consequences. And there is very least information that is coming from the global South itself. So this is one hurdle that since the domestically prepared information is not available in almost all the global South. So it is very hard for the policymakers, decision makers, think tanks, the civil society representatives to start comprehending what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages of having the solar radiation management for our specific region. So this problem has to be addressed systematically. And there are worries, as mentioned. One point I may want to say that, well, if we do SRM, is the interference in the course of nature, and these kind of questions that need to be discussed thoroughly and logically. For example, this was the constant question in the case of the experiment, large scale, complicated experiment I mentioned, CERN. Oh, you are going to collide two particles at very high speed. Look, the Earth will collapse. Never do this. So there were a lot of such issues. So they presented the facts. This was the same case for the X-rays. Now, who can say that they are not benefiting from the X-rays in their lab, in their diagnosis, in their security aspects? But in the 50s, after the Second World War, this is the same situation. When they were experimenting with the X-rays, don't play with the X-rays. They are very dangerous. This is interference, and this is going to lead to a lot of bad consequences. So one has to stay with the history and has to understand that these are the things that come with every new technology that helps one way or the other the civilization that are going to come next. So the point is that the non-stop engagement, non-stop expansion of the discussions over the topics, learning from the history of the large-scale experiments and how they benefited, how carefully they moved. These are the all key factors that non-stop has to be engaged so that regional to large-scale collaborations can be built up to discuss the implications of the new technologies, including the solar radiation management, its different practices that may come into the existence.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. so for highlighting that point. And yes, I also remember when all points were noted. I also remember the engagement SDPI had with C2G almost 1.5 years back when Mr. Janis came to Pakistan, and still remember he did this dialogue at SDPI, and I believe most of the discussion that went in the direction was of. Then I would also remember that most people were very curious on how this is actually going to sort of pose any political threats to different countries, and how it is actually going to create some regional conflicts, like what are we opening the region up to. So there were a lot of interesting debates, but I'm really glad that today we have been focusing more on the technical side, which already Zainab proved that there is a discourse developing in the positive side of the thing. So yeah, so after I'll be coming to Hassan Sipasa very shortly, but again, after this, I'll be requesting our esteemed panelists to sort of suggest any 2 to 3 key action points they think needs to be fished from this platform, because we're also thinking of sort of developing this very brief document that can actually be sort of circulated, and whatever points that you believe are relevant or important going away from this discussion, any recommendations that you have or anything. But again, with this, let me again come back to Hassan Siprasa, who also sort of wanted to respond to any of the questions that I initially posed. Yeah.
Thanks, Abed. And yeah, both of those questions are really great. I think it's kind of funny that the debate, while we were speaking about science here, the questions are very much related to governance, which is going to be our next webinar, inshallah. But as Dr. Athar also pointed out, yes, policies and advantages and benefits end up kind of, when we look back in history, we can see lots of examples of where people were resistant to those changes. As far as there being a global governance framework, at present, none exists, although the UN Environment Assembly, both in its 4th session in 2019 and in its 6th session in 2024, had a draft resolution that was looking at SRM and basically wanted to, at the end of the day, develop some assessments with respect to SRM. A few other major international organizations have looked into this. So the UN Human Rights Council has looked at it from a human rights perspective. UN Environment Program has looked at it from a scientific assessment perspective. And the UNESCO has looked at it from an ethical perspective. Similarly, the US government has announced a research plan overall. Europe has declared that it will look into this more from a risk framework. And Canada, UK, there are lots of countries in the global north that have declared that they are looking into these technologies, the science behind it, and what actually they can accomplish. So there's no global governance framework at present, but there's clearly a need, and the world is moving towards making a decision about that sooner rather than later. The second question was about carbon dioxide removal and how South Asian countries could pool their resources, share technologies, and develop cost-effective strategies to address carbon reduction. Absolutely, I have always been an advocate for regional cooperation, track 2 diplomacy, all of those angles to better understand what South Asia as a region needs, because we are all interlinked in terms of our regional climate and atmosphere. We are all impacted by the monsoon. We all have the glaciers up north that provide water resources to over 3 billion people here on our side of Asia. And so it's very important for us to work together, because as climate change worsens, it will create new resource constraints, which will then cause conflict. So we need to be ahead of them. And if we do SRM, hypothetically, potentially, and it potentially reduces some of those climate change impacts, well, how do those benefits get redistributed? And if there are some costs associated with it, how do those costs get redistributed so that the entire region can continue to grow and prosper? So I think, yes, absolutely, I'm a huge advocate for that. Zainab also mentioned a point that I briefly want to touch on, which is that we have limited capacity in Pakistan and, of course, in many global South countries. Language is a huge issue, scientific literacy, climate literacy, those are all massive challenges that need to be overcome. So yes, absolutely, building public engagement, presenting the narrative that we are exploring these technologies first as a way to understand whether they are even possible, if the benefits may outweigh the drawbacks, and then to let policymakers and governance systems to decide on whether to do this, and if we are to do this, how to do it in a judicious and fair manner. And that requires lots of conversations. It requires lots of engagement across multiple languages and with many, many stakeholders that generally are not included in the type of webinar we are creating here. But DSG, for our part, we are, this is the first step with Pakistan. SDP has been in this space for a long time. So we want to make sure that as we're continuing those discussions, that we bring in more and more stakeholders with the local languages present as well.
Yes.
Thanks, Abad.
Thank you, Hassan Prasad. Very well noted points, and thank you for responding to those questions as well. So now, again, coming to the last but one of the most important segments of today's session is that perhaps this is where we need to sort of decide what needs to be sort of some recommendations or action plans going forward in perhaps the near term for Pakistan, the short term for Pakistan, because what I just very quickly sort of just based upon discussion that we actually had today, that we need to, I think the first step would be actually scoping the relevance or scoping the feasibility, understanding its both positive as well as the potential risks that are imposed for Pakistan. So scoping that and bringing these universities, academics and the think tanks together to sort of conduct a comprehensive study on its feasibility, risks and potential benefits of SRM in the context of Pakistan is actually going to be extremely relevant. So if, we're available if perhaps the Prasad PhD, the Comsas nurse and the CPI, if we can sort of perhaps take a lead on this and come up with perhaps an initially document that sort of scopes all these things that's actually going to be very important for the stakeholders to rather get a very good understanding, because as far as my knowledge, those such documents, particularly for the context of Pakistan, does not really exist. And I think I'll again be requesting, just starting from again Dr. Fahim, if he has any other further points that he would actually like to sort of respond to or add on to the discussion, and more importantly, if you have any key action points or some policy or general recommendations that you would actually like to pitch from this platform that we can actually pitch in if any of the proceedings that we actually develop, and more importantly, that could be potentially useful for the stakeholders. Yeah, Dr. Fahim, perhaps if you could just very quickly touch upon.
Well, Ubad, again, this is a very important aspect of this challenge, global challenge, I would say. So, yeah, Hassan has categorically explained the scenario and the current scenario of SRM and the way forward the world is looking for. To be honest, in my opinion, there are some low-hanging fruit in this case as well. So, for instance, there could be a capacity issue, technical capacity. If we go for stratospheric injection, nobody, even in Pakistan, we are unable to have a control mechanism for that particular injection at the stratospheric level. And that has been done, that is supposed to be done through with the help of special planes that can actually fly into that particular altitude, and also through hot air balloons, but the control is less. Yeah, but if it's needed, in principle, which in the future scenario, it looks like it's a very much needed option as SRM. So if it's the low-hanging fruit, which I mentioned, is that if you could, there is an option by making your urban infrastructure turning them into reflecting surfaces, that can help better. It has less negative implication because all the way the radiation will get through the troposphere and also reach to the surface, but just slightly above the surface, it is going to reflect it back into the space, and then probably it will not have that much implications if it is reflected back from the stratosphere. So this kind of approaches could be given a trial. by like, for instance, road infrastructure could be turned into, rather than having tar coal, we can have other adhesive materials that can have a binding properties that can be used in the concrete. So it's relatively less absorbing as compared to the tar coal, carpeted road or something like this. So similarly, the building material can be, or like nowadays, it's very common uh, by painting white, which some reflecting paints are actually there, so we can have rooftops can be painted. So this kind of, even greening rooftop could be another options. So that can help to contribute directly or indirectly in SRM. And definitely it is going to contribute to the global warming, to counter the global warming. But now the question is actually, so there is still a list of questions that need to be addressed before taking into consideration all these options. So this is going to be just a retrofitting solution, but the short term. Like, for instance, if you inject any reflector, so what will be the fate of that reflector in the stratosphere? What will be the lifetime? And so let's presume it stays over there for 10, 20 years. What will be the next? So after that, it's like you're dimming the sun, and after that, when you turn on the sun, then the problem will start piling up again. So this is not a permanent solution. So I would prefer that we should go for. I agree with Hassan that this is a very costly solution to sequester carbon from the system. Technologies are not much advanced and not very much appreciated by the industrial sector as well. But so the one missing bit in this today's debate was that, okay, so we should promote somehow the circular economy approach while sequestering CO2 from the atmosphere or other greenhouse gases. Because this is going to, again, a win-win situation for all the stakeholders. So that means that you're not just capturing CO2, rather you are using for other industrial application, which might have another carbon footprints. So this is going to have like a cascading effect and the mitigation efforts. So it will have more impact rather than going some makeshift arrangements or some temporary solutions. So yeah. I guess I stop here.
So thank you so much, Dr. Fahim. Thank you for highlighting those hanging fruits, and we fully align with the points that you've mentioned as well. So coming to Zainab, yes, Zainab, any three recommendations or action points from your end?
Yes, thank you, Beth. So I also remember that when I was conducting my research on earthquake science, one of the phenomena that I was very fascinated with was the ionospheric perturbations, the D region, especially when there was an earthquake between Pakistan and Iran border. Some lights in the D region were observed by the satellites in India, and also even at that time when I discussed this phenomena with my peers and some other other friends, so they had this narrative that okay, that might be some natural supernatural thing, indicating that an earthquake is going to happen. So they were not aware of the electromagnetic radiation, that a phenomena that happens whenever there's an earthquake, that's a precursory phenomena. So I think there are some very interesting facts and cultural notions attached to different scientific phenomena, and I think this could also be part of research when you're conducting on SRM or any other technical aspect that is related to the physical science of climate. That how cultural notions shape the scientific evidence, and how culturally you can integrate or strengthen the climate action within the local communities. So I believe this notion needs to be also addressed, and cultural and social aspect must not be ignored when we are talking about SRM or any other physical science aspect, only then communities and youth and women, they can be made, public engagement at large can be ensured. So this is one of the key pointers that I would wanted to share as a way forward.
Thank you so much. Sanam, very well noted. Coming to Ms. Varisha. Yeah, please go ahead. Oh, okay. Sorry, I think perhaps there's some noise distortion. Ms. Varisha, we're just sort of requesting you if you have any 3 key recommendations going forward from this platform. We'll come to you next. First, let me go to Dr. Athar, and then I'll be going to Hassan Sefrasa. So yes, Dr. Athar, over to you, sir.
Okay, so I have these few recommendations, let's say call them take-home messages. The first one is that do awareness campaign in the local language, starting from the 9th or 10th grade students, because this is what we are very terribly missing, because climate change is some kind of the problem of the attitudes. If we start changing our attitudes, the environment surrounding us start changing. And as a result, on long term, the climate of Pakistan will change. So this is very much needed. It is there. I have been judged for the climate programs for many schools, etc. have been moving around. It is there, but it is in the rotten form. It is ready-made, prepared, and they even mention the emergency number as 911 rather than 15 or like that one. So you can imagine this, how the things are happening. So the well understood way is that to have the campaign of the awareness of solar radiation management, or in general any management scheme, radiation management scheme, solar radiation, that can help reduce the impacts of climate change in the local languages. There are examples, for example, in the South Korean language, in some of the Indian languages, some achievements have been done, some brochures and some small booklets have been prepared. So we can have interaction with them, and we can have the way forward coinciding with them. And second, the most important for the broader community, where the other stakeholders get engaged, is to develop the local information about the impacts of solar radiation management. This is what we are terribly missing. Even in case of climate change, we still have the challenges to have enough number of experts, enough number of think tanks that can deliver this information to the broader community. So these are the 2 very important messages. And in general, such activities like this one, which we are right now in the happening, this should be continued and should have more broader aspects. More diverse engagement from different stakeholders should be present, as Hassan Sipra has mentioned.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sir, for these key messages. And I fully agree with the points that there is a need to have this dialogue or this debate at a much more broader level, perhaps having the participation, especially coming from the key public sector entities in Pakistan as well, who are going to actually take these stakes to the different levels as well, and fully aligned with those. So now coming to Hassan Sipra Saab, and then after that I'll be coming to Dr. Khalid Walid for his final concluding remarks. And yeah, over to you, Hassan.
Thanks, Abed. So first things first, I do agree with Dr. Fahim's point that that SRM, any of the techniques or technologies, are not a permanent solution. In fact, I don't even want to call it a solution to climate change. At best, it is a stopgap measure to give us a little bit more time to get mitigation efforts ramped up, to get carbon dioxide removal scaled up, and to give us a little bit more space before we have to adapt to the most catastrophic impacts of more than 2 degrees Celsius temperature. So completely in agreement on that. With respect to what some of the recommendations could be for Pakistan specifically, I agree that awareness campaigns in local languages are extremely important. Farmers is an extremely important stakeholder group, but they're not the only ones. Indigenous groups, climate vulnerable communities, those are also places to target. I think a couple of key places where SDPI and other think tanks or civil society organizations could engage effectively would be with climate journalists. of Pakistan. There are not all that many in Pakistan, but the few there are, building their capacity to actually engage on SRM is important because, as I think you've understood, climate change solutions have a lot of issues and challenges, but they don't have the same challenges in terms of ethics and governance that solar geoengineering has. So while solar geoengineering technologies are fairly easy to implement, the fact that they have such tremendous amount of impact on a global scale and a fast impact and a cheap impact means that they must be much more closely examined from an ethical and governance perspective. So with that aspect, I think it's a great idea to put together a document that also targets policymakers of Pakistan with respect to how they should be thinking about SRM. I think that it can be housed very much, any conversation about SRM could be housed within climate change related programs, which I know that, there are different universities that have their environmental programs within which they also do climate research. I think those are great places to start housing a little bit of information on solar geoengineering as well. Even if one person starts developing expertise across each of those universities, that's a huge amount of expansion in capacity that will occur. And then I am 100% supportive of the idea that this should be done within the South Asian context, and building a report that is a South Asia level assessment of the science and governance challenges for SRM would be an exceptionally great way to move the conversation forward for our region. So thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, very well noted points. I think just last, Ms. Risha can sort of also, if you can hear me now, you can perhaps, you have also written down your suggestions in the comments box, but perhaps if you'd like to sort of take the mic and speak it to the larger audience as well.
Okay, it's just that Pakistan needs to be funded by the developed countries in order to structure our educational system, because Pakistan has the potential. The youth has the potential if they are instructed and directed towards a proper structured educational system. So it all starts with the foundation that we have in our country, foundation of the educational system. So we need the youth. The youth actually can be trained by incorporating the SRM into the curriculum, as well as through dedicated programs in universities and even in schools. So we need more funding opportunities to learn, grow, and fail in order to make the SRM climatic, like the climatic models handy for the youth to deal with the technicalities and quantification of the climate models. And I am one of the examples because I have done my MS in health informatics, and I have conducted my research on SRM under the supervision of Professor Dr. Atar Hussain. Thanks to him, that he must have seen something in me. Being a South Asian woman, he has given me, he has always tried to give me equal opportunities, and without any discriminations in like the way we see things happen in women's perspective in Pakistan particularly. So these are the key points that I wanted to.
Thank you so much, Ms. Risha. Well, extremely well noted points, and definitely the research improvements that needs to be at the forefront as we delve into this journey. So with this, I'll be coming to Dr. Khalid Waleed for his concluding remarks, and we sort of gain from that, because we fully understand that definitely while we're exploring this topic, there are definitely both positives and the negatives that needs to be discussed. Definitely we don't just have to get on the bandwagon because everybody is getting on that bandwagon. So perhaps it needs to be sort of explored. We fully understand that the science is a bit just like taking lead from what Dr. Fahim mentioned, needs to be developed very strongly before some very concrete solutions or experimentations are going to actually start. But I think the recommendations and the action points that have been mentioned, some of the suggestions that have been mentioned are extremely relevant, and perhaps we can adopt this step-by-step approach as we move forward. So with this, coming to you, Dr. Khalid, for your final intervention.
Thank you so much, Abad. I hope I am audible. Thank you so much, all the experts and worthy speakers. This has been a fascinating debate. I learned a lot, obviously. I hope the participants they should, I mean, make themselves clear as there are science and scientific practices that behind these, I would say, drastic sort of measures. First of all, what I would like to sort of elaborate here is that maybe the first step would be to focus on mitigation, adaptation, resilience, addressing climate justice, and then also explore these measures such as SRMs and geoengineering, solar geoengineering sort of things. Let me give you a example or a concept. There is a concept known as the 10th person rule. Hassan Sepra Saab, thank you so much for including STPI to become this 10th person. 10th person rule is that if there are 10% in a room and nine have a consensus on one thing, the job of the 10th person is to propose some alternative measure so that if 9% their solution is not working, the 10th% solution can be adopted. So it is always good to have alternatives available to us, particularly those backed by science. Again, maybe taking Dr. Fahim's point forward, maybe there are some alternatives to these geoengineering as well, but still we need to have this initiative and build advocacy, build narrative, discourse around it. So when it is needed, we have these sort of initiatives available to us. One very simple example of this may be quoted as the artificial rain phenomena. We have seen that this initiative of artificial rain that has been increasingly adopted in developing countries now. So this is one of the things that could resemble this initiative, and we can build our advocacy campaign around it. Second thing that I would like to sort of highlight here is that this elaborates and highlights need of one very important aspect is that as we are going into this integrated sort of system where climate change is part of our economics or climate change is part of our planning process, we need to integrate science into our planning processes as well. Maybe in Pakistan, we heard a lot about that there is a chief economist in Pakistan. Maybe now there is a time that we incorporate chief physicist, chief chemist, chief climate scientist, so that there is more scientific sort of opinion available when it comes towards planning and when it comes towards these sort of initiative as well. Second thing, Sipra Saab also mentioned that there is a need for, and Dr. Athar also mentioned that there is a need for a global governance and frameworks to be developed so that we can sort of explore more and have this inclusive sort of voice coming into this initiative. Second, where Zainab's point comes in, it is where we need to have advocacy, we need to have capacity building, particularly for the masses and particularly for the policymakers of the global south and developing countries. Because in Pakistan, pursuance of policymakers, it is a very difficult sort of job. So we need to sort of make it more simpler, make it elaborating science behind SRM, as well as the economics behind SRM, and maybe politics behind SRM, so that we have this more holistic and whole of a society, whole of a sector sort of approach, so that we can sort of support this initiative. Second thing that is very important in this regard, maybe establishing institutions in Pakistan, such as or strengthening the strengthening institutions such as global change impact study centers, linking them, providing them with modeling, providing us with more scientific-based data, so that the data can be incorporated in the planning processes, and we can have this. Lastly, maybe the human right aspect, as rightly mentioned by Hassan Saab, that UN is looking into it. Human right aspect is very important, particularly from the global south perspective. The UNEP is looking into the scientific aspect of it. So this is very important that UN do this, and from the platform of UN, there is a heterogeneous sort of framework where countries can implement this according to their heterogeneous sort of atmosphere, heterogeneous ecosystem, heterogeneous land attributes, heterogeneous policy frameworks. So these are the some facts that we need to incorporate if we want to make it a global policy, or if we want to have this broader discourse amongst it. But one thing is pretty much sure, that if we are going into the future and these sort of futuristic solutions and initiatives, they would require more and more scientific integration, or integration of science into policy making, particularly from the aspect of physics and chemistry, so that there are more informed decisions, or informed people in the policy arena. I feel that we need to have this more and cultivate this culture of science. Just to conclude this, we need more consultation, as Hassan Saab also elaborated, that this should be an inclusive process. We need to have more and more debate on this, maybe taking this debate to a larger audience, where we can answer the questions. But still, it is always good to have 10th person in the room having a differentiated opinion, so that when times come, we have these alternative solutions available to them. Just to conclude it, again, I love to use this term that there is a chaos in world, particularly in terms of climate change. So we need to use this chaos as a ladder, so that we can bring everyone together and sort of have this inclusive sort of integrated sort of solution available to us. Thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to having more these sort of consultations and events. Thank you. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, and thank you to all the speakers as well as participants for joining us today. It has been a wonderful discussion. Definitely, we have built positive narrative around it and a lot of action points for both SDPI and ESM to take forward from this, DHG take forward from this. And I think once again, thanking all of the speakers and especially the team that made it happen, especially Cyrus, put a lot of efforts into this, but what I can show you is definitely we won't be ending it over here. Both the CPI and DHG have sort of started this initiative. We will be doing a series of these consultations and these discussions, and perhaps building a better narrative around this going forward. And I think we'll also be getting back to all of you with the updated sort of schedule and the thematic area that will be focusing more into much more depth over the coming months. So with this, thank you so much once again, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you to all the speakers and the participants once again. Thank you so much. We'll get back to you with the details and the relevant proceedings from the session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Bab.
Thank you, Ved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ji. Thank you. Ji, hello.